I know it's post-lunch slump time, so we're going to make this really interactive. We're going to do some introductions, hear a little bit about what everyone's doing and with the exciting work that they're doing. And then we're going to be looking for everyone in the audience to come up with some questions. I've got some, just in case you don't have any, but maybe that sparks some ideas. But yeah, hopefully we'll be hearing from you, and the panel are very excited to be taking your questions and answering them and having a really good discussion. My name is Toni Brasting. I work for the Wellcome Trust. I actually was part of the funding team that worked on the game Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. I don't know if everyone's heard of it. Looked at psychosis, and one of the most amazing things that we found with this game was we were expecting a lot of people with psychosis to explain how, yep, this feels very similar to my experience, because the people who actually helped build it actually had psychosis. But what the most amazing part we found was that there were people who just didn't understand why there were voices going on, and they wanted the voices to stop. How can I turn off the voices? And it was really exciting, because at that point they went, oh, this is what someone with psychosis is dealing with. And for us, that was like a really beautiful aha moment that you can't get from people just with psychosis. It was looking at how the public deals with this. So that's my background. But for the panel, I'm going to ask some random questions of everyone. So I'll start with, we're going to start the other end. Charlotte. Sorry. So I guess,
Hello.
Charlotte, hi.
Yes.
Can we hear you?
I think so.
Sweet. Charlotte, you've worked on some games such as Lily and Rose's Garden. Can you tell me more about how your games create change for good?
Well, I hope they create change for good. I'm trying to make games that are more relaxing and not about achieving high scores. And I also try to put in every game a concept to create awareness. So Rose's Garden is a game about gardening with roses, and every rose is named after a famous woman using the rose cultivars. So you can read a little bit of their biographies, because I thought that women's history was not always well represented. So that's what I wanted to change. And Lily, still working on it, is a game about the negative health outcomes of childhood trauma. So right now you're dissecting a woman and you see what's happening inside the body when stressful events in childhood happening over and over again. And hopefully when people understand the science behind it, it will make more sense for doctors to screen every child instead of waiting for people to grow up. So does that answer?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah,
okay.
No, fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you. Great introduction. Claire, I know that you worked for 10 years in the games industry and then changed and started working on games that helped with scientific research and discovery. I mean, where did that drive come from?
It's not. Yeah,
there we
it's
go.
not. Okay. Okay. So yes, I was working as a project manager in video games for 10 years, and I really liked how vibrant the industry is, but I was missing something. I was starting wondering what else I could do, and that's when I discovered citizen science games. They are games that help scientific research, so games that are designed to solve problems, and games in which players and non-scientists like me can really contribute to genuine research. So I started, I created a website to promote this game. So I'm not making them. I joined the team a bit later on, but I'm not making them. I'm promoting them. And again, just because I think so these games, there have been a few discoveries linked to this game. So I think they can have a really big impact for biomedical research, quantum research, or biodiversity as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. Manjul, I know we were talking earlier about how you're actually not originally a games designer as such. You started out in the industry in a completely different way. I'd love to hear about what was your journey.
Sure. So my background is in social innovation. I spent a lot of my time developing products and services for the greater good, and then stumbled upon this company that I ended up becoming the CEO of. And because this is Women in Games, I'd just like to point out that we are 90% female, team of 20. And yeah, so I think games as a vehicle is something that is quite powerful. You've already seen some of the engagement facts from the previous presentation. And we just wanted to make sure that where therapy and clinical interventions that are highly evidenced, so there are certain things that are based around therapy in mental health, globally evidenced, and are actually quite powerful when done with the right training, consistently, with a high quality of service delivery, can be quite powerful and impactful for those receiving them. However, obviously, the service delivery part of it is not consistent. So can we create games that are also clinically sound, that can help people receive therapy, receive the mental health support they need, in a consistent and meaningful way? So that's something that we started to explore, and we are currently developing our second gaming product, which is also backed by the NHS. So yeah, that's us.
Congrats, that's awesome. Cool. Isabel, you've started a digital health startup using VR with patients called Immersive Rehab. Tell me more about it. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. I started, we just turned 3 actually a week ago, so that's really good. So I started the company because I had an accident myself 9 years ago now, where I basically lost my independence completely in a second. I went through neurorehabilitation myself to get back to how I am today. And so going through that experience was incredibly frustrating often, because initially you have a lot of access to rehab, but then gradually it decreases. But I was not independent enough to actually do anything on my own. So I was stuck in my bed, figuring out every point of my ceiling, I guess. So it was very hard physically, but also mentally, obviously. And that's basically how the idea of immersive rehab came about. I'm a mechanical engineer / biomedical engineer by background. And so I started to think about how can we make rehab, in particular neurorehabilitation for people with neurological conditions such as stroke, spinal injury, MS, ALS, more accessible, more engaging as well, but also more effective, because today a lot of people just go through rehab, they leave rehab, and they hardly have any mobility gain, especially upper limb balance-wise, and that's really what we focus on. So.
Amazing. Oh, I'm glad you're here with us today anyway, that's great. Thank you. Jude, we've pretty much already heard about what you do, so I'm going to ask you a question instead. In a good way, in a really good way. No, more, I think when I think about gamers and how I guess the industry, yes, there's a load of different people who play, but I guess you could say that there are a lot of industries who have a lot of people associated with them. Do you think that potentially gamers are more inherently good? Or do, you know, is there something that's inherent about gamers themselves that want to be more charitable or altruistic?
I think the biggest thing about gaming is the fact that it's about community, and you know, we're part of communities, and in a game we're problem solving together. So I think there is that kind of slightly more altruistic part of our mindset potentially. But I think kind of what I said in my talk was around kind of storytelling. I think that's a really powerful aspect of what we do in terms of designing games and telling stories and inspiring people to make a difference. But I think in general it's just that being part of communities and the overcoming challenges within games. If you apply that then to the real world, it makes a lot of sense.
That's a great answer. I just thank the panel for being here. You guys are amazing, so incredible, intelligent, amazing women. I love it. What I want to ask the panel, if no one else has got any questions right now, I'll start us off. I mean, apart from your own games, obviously, do you know of any examples that you think are really good, you know, games for good? Or do you think there are genres that you think we should be delving into that currently we're not? Can I start with maybe? Sure.
So I really like the game that's Dragging Cancer or Isabel. Games that raise awareness about certain difficult human experience and topics, and I really like also that they don't really, this may be a spoiler, but they don't really have like a happy ending, as a lot of games have the protagonist going to the journey and then, where there's a happy ending. So I would like to see more stories about normal day-to-day people having their own struggles.
I think there is an example with the game Sea Hero Quest, which was not made especially for to communicate, but one of the side effects of this game is that young people started getting interested in Alzheimer's disease. They started asking questions and communicating more with older people. So it's a side effect of a game as well, which is interesting.
You don't have to. Don't. I mean, if anyone here, like, do you think there are any genres that we're really? I think mini games are one area. I think there's also very art house games. They're very interesting. Do you think we're missing any genres with Games for Good that could be really interesting?
I actually wanted to talk about making games more affordable, because we work increasingly with a lot of low-income families. There are some awesome games that have been made in Oxford University. It's £3,000 to just buy the hardware to go with the game, which means the low-income families are perhaps never ever going to be able to access that product. And there are some really impactful ways in which people are using immersive technologies like VR, AR, and so on. But then again, how do we make games that are as engaging as, I mean, I'm personally a fan of Journey and some other kind of really strong narrative-based games. How do we make really compelling, awesome games without hiking up the cost of it, so that people can actually benefit from them?
That's a good point.
I mean, I think, games that make an impact, but I think, so I was at a conference last year, which is a conference for lawyers. It's about games law, basically. And I went the year before as well, and I kind of was quite down or shocked still about it, that it's still very normal that a lot of games that are being developed and a lot of money is being put in those games that are highly violent, highly sexualized in a negative way, which was always the case, I guess. But also that there could be so much impact that is made if they would put so much money in other types of social impact games, like Jude does, for example. So yeah, I think, I don't know, growing awareness in some way on that front that is actually not acceptable. I work in VR, which is a very new, it's a new kind of tech space, I guess, emerging since the past 3-4 years. And we've worked really hard with a group of women to actually make and try to make it a very inclusive environment, both for women, underrepresented groups, and so on, and to try and grow, make awareness around the content creation, essentially, that is actually not offensive, inclusive, and so on. So,
yeah, I mean, I think Hellblade and See Hero Quest have been mentioned already, and I think they're amazing examples. But I think, so I last year I was on the panel for the Games Beyond Entertainment for BAFTA, and I think what was really upsetting, and I've seen this over kind of the past years or so I've been in this space, is that there's amazing games that are being developed and created and put out there, but nobody sees them. So it's how do you cut through the noise and get the visibility that these games deserve? And unless you've got a big budget, or unless you've got like a press, like a story around what you're doing, or you win an award, that's going to get some press, but there's like thousands and thousands of games out there that are just never going to be seen. And if you look at the stuff that we do, we're not pushing the boundaries on gaming per se, but we're using a route to get to people to then inspire them to take action. And I think that's something we need to do as an industry, and in terms of making games for impact, is looking at, how can we be where people are? How can we get more attention and get people playing? Because there's just too much content going to waste that can make a difference. Sorry, that was me on my soapbox.
No, it's a really good point. Sorry. Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, Hellblade was one of those things. With Wellcome Trust, we were always focusing on how do we, rather than trying to push people to educate them about research and science, how do we get to be in the spaces that they're in? Yeah. And Hellblade was, to be fair, a gamble. It was quite violent. It's a +18. It was really violent, actually. I played it. I don't know if you guys played it. But yeah, the impact was so great because there are already people in that space who are really interested in it. So I completely agree.
And I think just on that, if you look at what's happening with the likes of Fortnite and Minecraft, there's movements within these games already around climate change. So is there ways to be able to kind of infiltrate these systems to get more good content that's going to make a difference inside the games that people are already playing?
Do we have any questions from the crowd yet? No? Oh, we got one up the back. Go for it. Do we have a mic for them? And I'll field the question unless you direct it at someone. So,
First of all, I really want to kind of praise Hellblade quite a lot, because my mum has psychosis, and that game genuinely changed my life, because I felt like I could see what she sees a bit and communicate with her in a different kind of way. But the kind of question I wanted to ask, it's a bit high level, I guess, but how, sort of, if you're in a company where you don't necessarily make decisions, how do you start to kind of impact some of this doing good? Like, how do you start to raise climate change and, you know, like that kind of...
no, it's a really good question. I mean, unless anyone wants to take it in particular, I'm going to give it to Claire. So, Claire, would you like to talk about what you think?
I quit my job. So the thing is, I did quit my job. I started on my own website to try to raise an awareness, and then contacted every team. So I just moved towards what I was looking at. You know, I did not convince my boss. He was not interested in games for good, so I could not convince him to do anything. So I just had to quit. So I'm sorry, that might not be the answer you wanted.
It's an honest answer, and that's what we're after today. Yeah, Manjul, did you?
I'll add to that. Somebody gave me a really great tip about 15 years ago, that if you decide that you have to get to that point, there are like quick ways to get there, and then there are slightly more lengthier and tedious ways to get there. So you find the one that's going to work best for you. If it means quitting your job, you have that answer. And if it means something else, some people go and do like postgraduate courses and so on and so forth.
Jude, you had...
Yeah, so I think what I would do would be kind of find out who's going to make the decision, and then find out what motivates them. And if it's money, show them they can make money from it. Not personally, like as a business. So so profit with purpose is really powerful. You know, show them that by making a difference, that it can impact the business bottom line too. And you can do that by showing that, you know, the players really want to be part of this movement, or that it's going to get extra press, or, you know, it's going to help you cut through the noise in some way. Kind of showing that it's like, yeah, I would say that it's probably back to your question of like your point about finding the fastest route. But I would definitely look at how you can link that profit and purpose together in order to make it really attractive for the business overall. Because once you start talking the language of the CFO, for example, then, you know, people are going to listen. And so that's a great way to, you know, show them you can make money.
Thanks.
Cool. Just a question here. Sorry, I'll come back to you.
Hi. So I've done a lot of research. I'm really interested in body image and the effect of games on like body bias. But I found it's really hard to find research on the effect of games it has on like big problems in society. So how do you tackle that, and how do you measure that? Like,
Isabel, would you mind?
Yes, so in our specific case, it comes down to trials. So we need to prove patient outcomes, which would mean that we would need to show, well, you have the normal way of doing treatments, for example, but with this new treatment, we will actually be able to improve patient outcomes for hospitals, and that is kind of all really, quantifiable measures. And that also goes for, I guess, if you would work on a psychological level, kind of seeing how a treatment or how a certain approach to dealing with people would impact them compared to how they're actually currently impacted. But yeah, studies, research would need to be, especially in a field of healthcare, yeah.
Of course. Manjul, did you want to also field this one?
I'll just add to that. I mean, in a very classic, boring fashion, we call something like this a feasibility study. And in the feasibility study, you'd want to have a manageable number of respondents, and you'd want to have the kind of cohort, the right kind of urban-rural environment, the right kind of ethnic diversity factors included, and then you run that study for a certain amount of time. And often it's really helpful to actually partner with certain academic bodies, because they love publishing. So you tell them you're going to help them publish something, they'll be all over it. So.
So with the citizen science games, it's a lot about publication as well, and you can really measure the results, because in a game like Eterna, when you design RNA molecule, you can see how many have been taken to the lab and made. So it means that the designs that the players made are good enough to be taken to the lab, and you can measure how many have been made or how many publications they have and things like that. Or that's measurable as well.
I was just going to say, I'll take the question here. Sorry, yeah. I don't mean to point at people, by the way.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask how sort of the integration of the indie movement, crowdfunding and social media has sort of affected your work within the games industry.
Can I give this one to Charlotte? Is that okay?
Well, how the social media and indie.
So, like, with your funding, you know, is it coming from other places? Being an indie developer yourself, how do you deal?
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting question. I'm lucky that I live in the Netherlands, where we have the Creative Industry Fund. I got that after I graduated. So during my studies, I got money to work on my own stuff, and then I got the Creative Industries Fund. And then I just worked as a waitress and sold computers part-time. And now I got another fund. So yeah, it's difficult. Indie games and art games, they usually get a lot of social media and publicity, but the games that sell often you don't really hear about. So I don't know, I really like to make the games. I'm more like maybe an artist making games, so for me it's about creating the art, so I'm fine with not having a lot of money.
Do you have people that you can go to talk to about these types of games? Like, is there any help available?
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. A lot of colleagues and indie friends give me tips on where to find money and where to get money. So I would try to make a lot of friends in the indie scene, and then someone will pop up and giving you the exact tip you need to go there. And yeah, just try to look for opportunities all the time, I guess.
Excellent. Oh, we've got one up the back.
Hi. With the title, it says like to create social impact. I think that unfortunately for me, I think sort of the violence aspect of it, when people, like the general public, perceive games to be quite a violent medium, and it's not helped with sensationalization of that by media and by like Donald Trump blaming things on games. Do you think it's more important to try and convince the general public that there's, you know, some good to be found in games, or do you think it's sort of a losing battle and you have to convince them by making them play, or getting, you know, people who do play those games to convince them otherwise?
Jude, can I ask you to take this?
So I mean, I think people are starting to realise that games are like probably one of the most powerful media platforms ever existing. When you can see from the size of film and music that, you know, our industry is double that size. So I think it's taken time. But yeah, you know, there has been so much negative press, and whenever anything bad happens, it's always kind of games are pointed at. But I do think you're right. I think it's, you know, the more you can kind of create that groundswell by educating people on games are not all bad. And I think it's something like, is it 2% of games are adult content, and so 98% are kind of family friendly, casual, social gaming. But none of that's really talked about. But I think there's almost been this kind of awakening, even in the past 6 to 12 months, where, you know, you've got kind of other organisations, like I spoke about the article with BBH. We did a Mindshare event last week, who are a media agency, and they had all their partners there, and they're looking. It was all about gaming. So you were starting to see these other channels that didn't really pay any attention to gaming before, and it was kind of like, if they were asked to make a game, it was like, oh, quick, you know, make a game, fling it out there, see what happens. But now, you know, gaming is such an important part of their strategy and to their businesses growing and staying alive. So I think more people are starting to pay attention and see what and seeing the possibilities. And I think, you know, we probably need to shout more in the press about the good stories to try and kind of drown out the bad. And I think, you know, we talked about kind of, you know, academic studies. I think the more that we can show, I know there's a lot of academic studies about serious games and games for impact, but I think the more that these can be talked about in the press and actually show the real world impact that games can make, I think that the conversation is going to completely change in the next 5 to 10 years.
I was just going to say as well, within Wellcome, we get a lot of grants for research, especially health funding. And we're finding a lot more researchers are actually involving game mechanics and I guess game design within a part of their studies. And getting funding for that. So it's a really interesting area. I know that lots of the panelists here are working on health issues. I guess I'd really love to understand sort of like, where do you see sort of games and health and research sort of merging? Is it becoming one? Is it easy? Is it hard? What's going on with it?
It is. Well, when I work with patients, it's just incredible to see how they open up and how they suddenly going from feeling extremely down to having 10 minutes of their life being incredibly up and feeling empowered and doing something independently. And I think that's just going to grow within the, just because of healthcare in general, it's under so much pressure of funding, of resources, of people that, and there's so much potential within, not within everything, it's not going to work for everything, but within certain fields, gamification approaches will really impact or can really impact how a therapy is being approached. Like, for example, within rehabilitation or within psychological treatments where they work on PTSD or paranoia or other within people that suffer from Alzheimer, for example. Like, so I think, but because of there's a fine line between an actual treatment and what is a game, and having, as soon as you want to have it as a treatment, it needs to pass certain requirements because you're actually impacting someone's health either in a negative or a positive way. And that is something that is currently still evolving as a digital health. The industry itself, it's still very much in a very young stage, and mobile health products coming in, but still needing regulation there, while you have the wellness, maybe meditation platforms, which obviously is not, it's a very different space, but it can merge in some way, and that I think needs further research regulations and so on, but validation is key, so, because, yeah, health of people is the most important thing. So no matter what you develop that is very cute or nice, it has to help people within our space, and that's something.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think you've captured something really interesting. The first time I heard the terms software as a medical device was the start of a really painful 3-year period of my life, which was basically trying to educate regulatory folk what gaming is about. The fact that you always have V1, V1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you keep adding, you keep building. A lot of people don't get it. So if your knowledge as a game developer, as a game designer, as a game producer is here, it's worth knowing that a lot of other industries are lagging behind. People don't understand gaming, they don't understand digital interventions. So if anybody here is already on that journey, so you probably can empathize with me, and those who are planning on doing something, which you must, I think just be aware that there's a lot of orchestration of different levels of knowledge in this area that you might have to orchestrate. It's not impossible, people are doing it, people are publishing games, so it's just, I guess what has helped us is having the right partnerships in place. So just to give you a sense of the 100% of our work, of that, only 30% is about the game production. So there's 70% of other stuff that we have to do to qualify as a health tech intervention that can be used by real people who need our product.
Well, just what I want to add is what's important is the collaboration between the right people. So if you want to go into serious games for health or things like that, make sure you've got game designer to make the game entertaining and rewarding, and just the right scientist to make sure that the treatment is good as well. So maybe that's what is missing sometimes. It's the funding to get the right team together, enough people to make a good experience.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah, cool. We've got one here. Oh, we've got two.
Hi, I'd love to hear about a game that you've played that had a profound impact on your life, or how you lead it, or inspired you to work in this sort of area.
Can I put that to Charlotte? Is that okay?
Well, I don't know if it's a game for good, but my first game was Assassin's Creed. And it showed me that I was really naive back then. I was 16, maybe, and I thought, oh, if I'm going to make games and I can create everything, that's not really how games work. But that's how I got into games. I guess the first game that was made an impact, or I saw what games could do, was Papa Yo. You know about this little kid who was an alcoholic father, and it's a monster in the game as a metaphor for the story. So yeah.
Beautiful. Jude, did you have any game that made you start off in the industry? Like, I need to be part of this industry.
I don't know. I think all the games I played, I just wanted to be part of the industry. But I think it was, I mean, the games that I helped build in the first startup. I mean, they're not kind of big popular titles. They were for corporates and for education, but they were based around soft skills, so team building, communication, problem solving. And I think that was the kind of the penny drop moment for me, is actually seeing how games technology was changing people's lives. And we were going into schools, and you had kind of the gifted and talented kids, and then you had the kids that maybe needed a bit more help, but by playing this game they were all on the same playing field, they were all playing together, and you saw the ones that maybe struggled a bit actually excel, and they worked together. And that, I think that memory will always stay with me, because you saw the change in real time. So yeah, so I can't pinpoint it to a particular game. No. I mean, Little Big Planet, but love. I know, me too. But building worlds.
Yeah. I was going to say, one of my favorites, I was working at Shell at the time, and the reason I got into games design and did my master's was purely because we were working out how to make the sales team work better. And actually what I found was an online sort of choose your own adventure comic book that was based on how to deal with difficult situations in Africa. So people walking in and having to negotiate with different people and what to say. The thing is, I've now been in Africa. I've been in Swaziland to talk about snake bites, and I'm dealing with the exact same things, and it's so helpful. It was amazing. But it was what got me off my chair and went, I'm sorry guys, I'm leaving. I'm going to do my master's. We had another question here.
Yes. So it seems to me like creating games for social impact is a subset of the game industry. And my question is, first of all, like, how do you get funded? But then also, if you do venture into this space, do you have to kind of give up some career progress where you would make more salary as your experience grows?
It's a good question. I mean, the funding model and how that works, I guess, does anyone in particular want to take that one? Because I'm sure you all had to deal with this process.
So in games for science, usually it's linked to academia, so it's scientific funding. And so yes, again, you need to apply with a scientist who will know how to fill all these applications, which are quite a big job. There is Innovate UK and the Wellcome Trust as well, who can really help fund this kind of games. I think Wellcome is maybe more related to health, but Innovate UK is, there is a smart competition which is about any kind of innovation, and games can be part of it. So I think you can apply to this.
Jude?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, government grants, foundations, especially foundations that are interested in a particular area. If you've got a game that aligns to that, it's a good place to start. But in terms of investment, so we're slightly different because we're a platform. So we've gone out to raise money before. We've done an angel round and 2 seed rounds. And I think it's just kind of shown that there's an appetite for what you're doing. There's a market for it. Investing in gaming content, I think you've got to find particular investors. Not all funds will look at gaming, but I think there's more funds now that are starting to look at gaming. But I think it's just being, shown that there's a market and that there's an audience that will play the game, and kind of extrapolating out to show what it could look like in the future. It's interesting. I think I've seen more investors now start to look at, do you have a good content strategy, because they see that as a defensible business. So if you do want to go down the equity route, just make sure you're looking at the right types of investors, because you can spend a lot of time talking to a lot of people who it's just like dating. But just do your research first.
We should have that in a magazine somewhere. I was going to ask quite a controversial question, actually, of the panel. So we're in a panel for Change for Good. we also know that this is a space where there are a lot of people, and a lot of people can be impressionable, and there's lots of great things that can come through games. There are also lots of platforms through which maybe not so great things happen, say a lot of racism or violence. And what is it our role in the community to think about those things? Or is it like the rest of all the other genres of media where we're thinking that's just part and parcel of the world? Where do you think we sit? And I guess, Charlotte, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first.
Well, I draw the line when it provokes hate or violence. But I think games are also an art form, so I think people should be allowed to have their opinion and views on the world, even if I don't agree with them, because I think art is a great medium to get a discussion about it. So it's really a non-violent way. But I draw the line when it's, just like I said, when it provokes hate or personal attacks or stuff like that. Yeah.
I mean, does anyone else? Oh,
So we, so I work in the immersive tech industry, a very new a type of way of content creation, I guess. But I think, so we wrote this manifesto. You can find it under Vision for Women in VR. And it tackles 4 pillars, which is industry, hiring, content creation, and I forgot the 4 now. But I think it is, from my perspective, and from I think it is a responsibility, because the more you put out content that is actually inclusive and deals with issues around racism, violence, the narrative or the appetite will change for those type of games as well. And if you look at the tech industry today, it's a very male-dominated industry where a lot of it is accepted, whether it's being offensive and so on towards certain groups in content creation. And I think the risk is that, again, in the immersive tech space that is growing fast in content creation will happen very similar. And yeah, and I think there's something kind of, censoring is never good. And I think that it's finding the fine balance between having something at least of a red flag against certain content creation that is not acceptable, I think. My very opinion.
No, it's good. Do we have any other questions? Oh, we've got one just there.
In the vein of what you guys were just talking about, I'm wondering how you guys feel about satire in games as well. Like, how does that kind of play into this idea of not necessarily censorship, but us being responsible for the kind of content that we produce, like just satire in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. No one wants to take this one. Manjul, do you want to take this one?
I think all I can say is, like, in the sector that we work in, there is a lot that we are not able to do. So when it comes to content creation, whether it is an artistic expression or whether it is, I know that a lot of people play violent games and all sorts of different types of kind of strands of games as a form of release, and you can see value in that. But for us, things hardly pass. So our games actually in the health sector are quite clinically sound. They've been passed by people who are experts in the school curriculum. So there's a lot of stuff, like especially around satire and stuff, we just don't even talk about it. It's just not even on the table, right?
It's a good question. I mean, Jude, because I think there's a lot of people out there that think or are very passionate about something. Potentially, a lot of other people might not be passionate about or might not see it as change for good. How do you pick who you work with, or what drives you to choose who you work with?
So, in terms of all the different partners that we work with, so I mentioned in my talk this morning earlier about the global goals, and so UN Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 goals that have been outlined as the goals that we need to achieve by 2030 to make the world a fairer place. When you look at the goals, you look at they've got indicators, so they kind of give a bit of a guide in terms of what needs to happen in order to achieve those goals. So in terms of the people that we work with, we look at who who's striving towards achieving these goals, and then kind of work with them based on shared values. So, you know, if you look at Dove, for example, you know, they're very passionate about health and well-being. If you take a company like Pepsi, you know, bottles, you know, they're very passionate about kind of recycled bottles and the plastics issue. So that would help us kind of look at, you know, which brands would we want to work with. And we also do things like we look at the Havas Meaningful Brands Index. So there's actually an index to look at which brands are at the top, which ones people see as being most meaningful and making a difference. So it's not about greenwashing, it's about actually making a true meaningful difference. And then when it comes down to the games that we work through, it's always hard to tell how the audiences are going to react, because it's different types of impact in maybe different countries, so you don't have full visibility to begin with, so it's a bit of a kind of guess at the beginning, thinking, well, you know, we know that male, female, age 14 to 18 might be going through you know, body confidence issues, so we'll target the games that those audiences are playing. But when they play as well, they don't have to play one of our playable ads. They can cross it out and just go back to playing the game that they were playing. So we start to look at, you know, how many people started to play the game, how engaged were they, how many seconds did they play through, did they play to the end? Because then it starts to give you a level of engagement, and then you can start to see which types of audiences would be more aligned to the impact that you're trying to make. So in terms of the games that we go through, it's always a bit kind of hit or miss, but what we're trying to do internally is look at the different publishers that we work with, because we work through a network, but we also work direct with publishers. And some publishers have got specific kind of CSR issues that they want to address. And it's always great when you get that kind of perfect matchmake of the brand and the publisher, because then you're achieving company goals, but then it comes down to the audience. Do the audience want to participate? So there's kind of a lot of moving parts in terms of trying to find the right fit. And, you know, a lot of it is testing over time. But we start with kind of looking at the brands and their goals and making sure that it's legitimate and they want to make a difference, and then the rest follows from there.
I think we're getting close to the end of the session, so if anyone had a burning question, now is the time, or I'm going to end off with something. Nope, good. Because my question's pretty good. No, I just want to ask, for all of you, you've been in the industry now, I think it's quite a challenging one, to be fair. Normal games are hard enough, let alone something that's trying to actually create social change or create change in people. If you could give any piece of advice, just one piece of advice to anyone working here who might be interested in working in it or currently working in it, what would you give? Charlotte, can I start off with you?
So a big lesson that I learned is that keep in mind that you gotta have fun while doing it. I was really trying to become good at what I was doing, so pushing myself constantly, and then I realized at the time that this is not the way to do. So that's my biggest lesson: is keep yourself in check, that you're enjoying what you're doing.
Good answer.
I think for me, at the beginning, I was a bit shy of talking to the person I wanted to talk to. I didn't dare to contact them. And after maybe a year, I started going for it, and I had really good answers. The people who are passionate about the same things than you will take the time to talk to you. So I would say just try to speak to the people.
I think my angle is more of a social impact one, obviously. I would say just as much as you know the game side of things, try to build your knowledge base around the impact that you're trying to achieve, the problem you're trying to solve as well, because you're going to have to speak about that as and when the time is right, where you're having the right conversation with either somebody you want to collaborate with or not. Second thing that I wanted to mention earlier was that we shifted from a B2C model to a B2B model because of the lack of funding. So we really struggled to sell our products in the marketplace, competing with the likes of some of the big kind of games publishers who put out millions of pounds of budgets for marketing, which we couldn't do. So we started partnering with charities and other organizations who were doing basically what we wanted to do. We were like, there's a better way to do it.
So particularly for healthcare, understand who you're making it for. Talk to the people you're making it for before you make anything. Because you can spend a lot of work on a game that you actually think, oh, this will be great, but actually it will not work for the patients, for example, you're actually making it for. So you'll have to start from scratch again. So that's really, really important in healthcare. The second one I would say is surround yourself with a great support network, whether it's women or men or anybody, that can just keep you, like it helps you get going and just you can bounce off ideas and so on, and that's really important for myself still as well to keep sane. So
I think something that I said earlier, but think about how you're going to get your game seen. How are people going to play it? Because if you create a great game that you think is going to make an impact and nobody plays it, it's not going to make a difference. So think about how you cut through the noise. And you touched on partnerships. Is it going through a specific partner that can give you that visibility? But it's absolutely key that if you've got something meaningful, that people see it.
And I was just going to add, don't be afraid. I think there's a lot of perception around what a change for good game could look like, or what it should look like, or what mechanics it should involve. I think you can pick any genre of type of game, and it's more about fitting the audience and worrying about how you're going to get it seen and who is going to be playing it and how they will be reacting to that is the most important part. So don't be afraid if it's a hack and slash. If that's what you like making, there's a way to make it for good. So, but I just want to say thank you so much to my panelists. They're incredible women, and I'm so happy to be up here with them. So to Charlotte, Claire, Manjul, Isabel, and Jude, thank you very much. And if I can round of applause.